squad on UE5 has been available to the public for well over a month and has had a fair few playtests now. The firefights have been intense,
inside the building,
action-packed.
Oh, and to the west too. Oh, he's right there. He's right fucking here.
And I've had some beautiful moments taking out enemy after enemy in quick succession.
Moving to your position.
On the street. Nice. Good hit. Lead a little. Yep. Machine gunner's coming up. Oh my god.
Oh, I'm fucking him up, bro.
But has the performance improved? Well, I've played quite a lot of UE4 and a fair bit of 5.3 and 5.5 now, so we'll use that experience to explore that next. In this video, I will show performance testing from all three versions and give some thoughts on the graphic settings, with a few helpful tips on what settings are actually important. We will make comparisons between UE4 and UE5, using maps that haven't been changed too much and still look similar in visuals. I will also make sure that I'm in full servers, near the action, so somewhere near the main objectives where most of the friendly and enemy players will be. This way I can get as close as possible to a fair test between versions and not just rely on personal anecdotes. Anyway, since my previous video, I've upgraded my 2070 to a 5070 Ti, and in the old UE4 engine I'm getting anywhere from 180 to 240 FPS at 1440p native. However, in UE5.3 I was barely getting close to that, even with DLSS performance. See, with the game now having more advanced lighting, longer draw distances, and just better graphics in general, I think that keeping that when the update's pitch was that the game would run better is going to be tricky. Especially as the update is set for a summer release now. There would have to be some development wizardry, or the game is going to have to look worse, which some people are really not going to like. Seriously, I don't envy being the people who make this game, especially nowadays with everyone thinking they know what's best. Problem is, if the update does actually release with a very noticeable performance decrease, the unhappy gamers who can't even physically play something they spent money on is going to make the release of the gunplay changes look like a celebration. So, the reduced performance found in Unreal 5.3 is probably why the game is going to use 5.5 now. But before we go more in depth about performance differences, it's important to talk a bit about graphics settings because they go hand in hand. And to start, I think it would be good to talk about the anti-aliasing and how it affects performance and visibility. Now, this may fall on deaf ears, but I wish they would fix the foliage and shadows to look less pixelated again with anti-aliasing turned off. Especially for those lower spec players, because performance in UE5 is actually noticeably better with no anti-aliasing than with native TSR, DLAA or FSR anti-aliasing, which was barely the case with UE4's TAA. This would give people a passable looking option with better performance and good visibility, perfect for lower specs at 1080p, which with anti-aliasing can be too blurry for some people. Alright, so for the testing, it was done on some mix of optimized settings. Whatever settings affect the FPS most get lowered, and then visuals come after that. Not because of being competitive, as super high FPS doesn't really matter that much in games with slower squad. But for testing, it's fairer for everyone to have it lower, and because good graphics to my eyes at least is high FPS on a high refresh rate display, it just looks much more lifelike. It's important to mention as well that there's some settings that give an obvious disadvantage. Like for example, particles should be set to at least high, otherwise you can't see enemies' muzzle flashes, which is a very important setting. It basically saved my life in this clip. And there are a few other settings like shaders that turn on movement on trees, and the 5.5 global illumination setting. It has this weird effect on foliage, but does have an impact on FPS when turned up though. So first, I'll start by showing you my performance on UE4 at native 1080p on my old 9900K and 2070 build. This setup mostly saw around 60 to 80 FPS in full servers. Then, next we will look at what changed when I upgraded the 9900K to a 9800X 3D. So basically that CPU alleviated UE4's CPU bottleneck and moved us up to about 140 FPS at 1080p native. Now, moving up to Unreal 5.3 at 1080p native, the 2070 was hit hard by UE5's GPU requirements and moved back down to 60 to 80 FPS. Basically, the 9800X 3D could no longer give the same performance it did in UE4 without a better GPU. So that was when I upgraded my 2070 to a 5070 Ti, which could have anywhere from 180 to 240 FPS on UE4 at 1080p and 1440p native. And that also alleviated the UE5.3 GPU requirement a little bit, though still not fully. But it did bring me up to around 160 FPS in UE5 at 1080p native, and around 120 FPS at 1440p native. So, a fairly big performance decrease at native resolution when going from UE4 to UE5.3. And I would say it's mostly from increased GPU requirements. Alright, so now we'll move on to 5.5, as that has come out on the playtest. So I decided I would go through and test several maps one by one. I will include AA set to none, DLAA, and DLSS performance in 5.5, with the UE4 versus 5.5 first. So with Fallujah, at native 1440p there's a 30% performance decrease or so between UE4 and 5. And between the three UE5 comparisons, I would say AA set to none does surprisingly well against DLSS performance. With Yehorivka, there is the same performance decrease, about 30% give or take, so around 190 FPS down to 120 FPS, and I think the map looks better in UE4. The colours and lighting seem more balanced overall. But in the UE5 comparison, DLSS performance is doing as it's supposed to and has a fairly big lead over No AA and DLAA, which both have similar performance between them. And with Narva, another 30 or 40% native performance decrease, and both engines look the most similar out of all of these comparisons. In fact, I think I would find it difficult to tell them apart in a blind test. I never had a problem with the look of this map though, I guess just the performance isn't as good here. However, in the UE5 comparisons, AA set to none does very well compared to DLSS performance, considering that is at upscale from 720p. And finally, Basrah on its own, as obviously I can't compare that to anything. So, overall, it definitely seems UE5.5 hasn't changed much from 5.3 yet. Of course, you should make your own opinion, but mine is that it's probably going to be difficult to get the old native frame rates back, even with engine upgrades. At least without visibly reducing the graphics in some way. I'll happily take the L though if they manage to do it, and I'll make another video with more comparisons if they do. The performance may just end up like so many other games nowadays, relying on upscaling to get the same performance we used to get. Which is a shame because I think DLSS and FSR should be there for people with low-end cards to keep up, like 3060, 4060 and 5060 users. I think my main conclusion on performance in UE5 is going to have to be that GPU will be everything in Squad now, compared to what it was for most of the game's lifespan. You can see that as a good or a bad thing. Good because the modern consensus on PC parts is people should focus on GPU and play at max settings, meaning as well that a lot of casual pre-built PC gamers may be better supported. Also, with a bad CPU and a good GPU, you may perform not too badly compared to UE4. But this could be bad as well because with GPU prices being as high as they are, the best GPU in the world is $2,000, but the best CPU, motherboard and RAM bundled together is well under $1,000. Anyway, something good I can end on is that since my previous video, shooting feels more responsive and people go down fairly quick. Also, the game now has DLSS 4 and at 1440p my game is looking surprisingly crisp and clear even in motion. And the scopes with DLSS also look less blurry than UE4. 1080p is obviously still very blurry overall though, and performance isn't even that much better now DLSS is more viable than it used to be, which doesn't bode well for people with older GPUs, as DLSS has better performance than UE or GPU is. Overall though, I'm really trying my best to stay excited for where the game can go because there's obviously no going back now and it's still free updates made by passionate developers at the end of the day. Unlike a lot of other games I've wasted much more money on.